Antarctica is the quietest of the continents. And often that silence is the sound of death. It's morning, it's shower time, and just like any sort of hostel, Scott Base does have showers. They're short of water though, because it's all made from salt water and it's expensive. So the limit for the shower, you can only be in there for 3 minutes. If you're in there for more than 3 minutes, an alarm goes off for 10 seconds. If you're still not out, the housemaidens come in and whip you with alkathene pipe. I'm just joking about the alkathene pipe. There are showers, you got to keep them short, but I tell you what, it's got to be a lot better than 100 years ago when Scott was walking to the pole. About 2 minutes. I'm just finishing off now. Oh, they should bring some of the viewers across from TV too. Yeah.
1910, and everybody who could crowded into Littleton to wave Godspeed to Scott, as he once again turned his ship Terra Nova south to the Big Ice.
This was Scott's second attempt at the pole. He'd led the Discovery expedition in 1902 with Shackleton as one of his crew. And the Canterbury people were very much aware of what was going on. They would follow all the progress in the papers, would they?
Absolutely. It's big headline news in all the local papers of the time. There was great interest because, in fact, for the first time in history, the world was focused on New Zealand and what was happening here. Suddenly the media and so on are very interested in Littleton and the Antarctic expeditions because, in fact, it was just very similar to blasting off to the moon from Hagley Park in 1901.
And a blast off to the moon requires a lot of preparation. So for Scott's expedition, a lot of this was done near Littleton on Quail Island. So Baden, what was Quail Island's connection with Antarctica?
Well, it is the Canterbury quarantine island, and all animals coming in from the outside world had to be held in quarantine, so that when the Antarctic expedition of Scott and the Discovery arrived, their dogs were placed in quarantine on this island.
Yes.
And, of course, subsequently, Shackleton, arriving in 1907, had his ponies placed here. The dogs came from Stewart Island and therefore weren't necessary for them to be in quarantine. And Scott again in 1910 had his ponies and his dogs and later on Indian Army mules all placed and trained on the island.
So how would they train them? Because obviously it's not snow here.
Well, they had to use things like wheels on sledges and so on. The main thing was to get the dogs and the animals used to harness.
OK, so they're here for a while with some of the dog handlers who were getting them sorted out and getting the pecking order and everything right in the packs.
Absolutely, and also the man in charge here was a horse breaker, so he could actually break in the ponies and so on himself.
So this is the wharf on Quail Island where all the ponies and the dogs were loaded on the ships to go to Antarctica. And of course all the ponies died down there and most of the dogs didn't return either. By the time Scott had headed south from Littleton with dogs and ponies in tow, he'd received a message from Amundsen to say he was also heading for the pole. It was now a race between the Norwegians and the British. Scott chose McMurdo Sound to set up base. A prefabricated hut of 18 by 9 metres was erected at Cape Evans.
It was a building full of energy, full of light, warm. About 25 guys living here, doing significant work, significant science. And then, of course, the trip to the pole. What's lost on us now, too, is this would have been brand new. It would have been a very flash and it would have been like in a brand new building you'd see in a House and Garden magazine, wouldn't it?
Pretty well much, yeah. I mean,
timber building, brand new, nice lino. Stove would have been running. Clissold the cook right behind us making bread rolls. Fantastic.
Ponting doing his photos.
Yeah, doing all that. You know, guys on the table doing diaries. Oates over there on his bed fixing gear. Ponies right behind us. Would have been great.
Scott was a military man, so it was very officers and the others, wasn't it?
Very much so, yeah.
So he had his own corner where he had to stay.
He did, yeah. And it was divided into officers, gentlemen, and the others. And the others were the enlisted men.
Yet the dining room table looks like a big communal dining, like they're all here together having dinner. Was that the case?
On special occasions, yeah, like midwinter dinners, birthdays, they'd all be around here. But just in here is what we refer to as the bulkhead. And if you're an officer and a gentleman, be quite happy to go anywhere in the building, particularly over that area. If you're an enlisted man, you had to get permission. They treated it as British naval regulations. You had mess decks, and a lot of the enlisted men actually ate in here. They didn't eat with the officers.
It's like a ship.
Yeah, yeah.
Scott's crew spent a winter preparing at the Discovery Hut before the real heroics could begin. On November the 3rd, 1911, 13 days after Munstan's party had left, Scott's party moved on. And to everyone's surprise, for his final assault to the pole, he chose 4 instead of 3 companions. They would man-haul sledges from the Beardmore Glacier to the pole itself. Scott's party comprised of his close friend Dr. Edward Wilson, Henry Bowers, known for his toughness and cheerfulness, Edgar Evans, who is described in Scott's biography as a beery womaniser who was running a bit too fat, and Lawrence Oates, a Boer War veteran and expert horseman. 5 men in a 4-man tent. Scott's diary recorded doubt about bringing the extra man.
I'm surprised to find it takes half an hour longer to cook our food for 5 than for 4. I had neglected to think of that when I made the change.
On January the 4th, 1912, the last support party turned back and Scott was confident that they would beat Munster to the pole. Bowers spotted a black speck ahead and then dog tracks, which told them that a Munster had beaten them. Scott was crushed and wrote in his diary,
Great God, this is an awful place, and terrible enough for us to have laboured to it without the reward of priority.
This must have been how Scott died, in a tent very much like this. He got to the pole and he realised the Norwegians had got there first. A month later, Evans fell and died. A month after that, Oates decided to take his own life by wandering away from the tent into the snow. So Scott was left with Bowers and Wilson. They both perished, so Scott wrote his final entry into his diary. He undid his sleeping bag, he leaned back as if to say, I am spent, Antarctica, come take me. With frostbitten hands, Scott had written,
Had we lived, I would have had a tale to tell of the hardihood, endurance and courage of my companions, which would have stirred the hearts of every Englishman.
In these days it's really fashionable to like Shackleton and see him as the great adventurer, the great navigator, the great man manager. But I always knew about Scott first, and for me, I suppose I have the most fondness for Scott. He was human, he had failings, but you know, he paid a big price for it, and I suppose even coming to this hut has reaffirmed that for me, is that his story is the one that really resonates with me, both with the heroic nature of it and also just epic tragedy. Getting to the pole second, dying on the comeback, I mean, it doesn't get more epic than that. This is Observation Hill, and at the top of this is the memorial for Scott that the party made and erected before they left. And it's called Observation Hill because this is where the remaining party would come often and look south, out between White and Black Island, to watch for Scott and his party to return. And of course they never returned, and the tent was found, and the diary and the note, and the bodies. They're still somewhere under the ice, making their way glacially towards the sea. And this is the memorial I've been really keen to see that Scott's remaining men erected in his memoriam. And it says, in memoriam to Captain Scotts, Wilson, Oates, Bowers and Petty Officer Evans, who died on the return from the pole March 1912 to strive, to seek, to find and not to yield. It must have been an incredibly moving scene when they carried this cross up the hill and erected it. Beautiful cross, incredibly moving place to be. Remember that, to strive, to seek, to find and not to yield. Oamaru, South Island, New Zealand, and this is the place, the location of my favourite and perhaps New Zealand's most important Antarctic connection. 10th of February 1913, Scott's boat Terra Nova arrives offshore at 2 in the morning. 4 or 5 men get in a dinghy and they come ashore. The night watchman in that red shed behind me, he says, hello, 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 what's this? Maybe smugglers, maybe people up to no good. He contacts the harbour master. The harbour master comes and sees these men. They say they're part of Scott's party and they have very important news to send to Britain. Now subsequently, history will tell us that news they sent back to the expedition funders, Century News in Britain, was the news that Scott and 4 other men had died returning from the pole. Why they came to Oamaru, no one knows. They could have gone to Port Chalmers, they could have gone to Littleton, and no one also knows the actual contents, the wording of the telegram. Maybe it said, Scott and 4 others got to pole, beaten by a Musden, or perished on the return. Britain and the Empire were greatly moved by the heroic, tragic death of Scott, Oates, Evans, Wilson and Bowers. And for New Zealand, this sense of grief was particularly strong because Scott and his party spent a lot of time here. It was their port of departure, and also it was the place where news of their demise broke. As a result, throughout New Zealand, there are a number of memorials to Scott and his party, including this oak here in Oamaru, and this tremendous monument in Port Chalmers, Otago, and Falcon and Oates Street here in Dunedin. Hang on, I haven't finished here yet. And the reason they called it Falcon Street is because his name was Robert Falcon Scott. Robert Street would have been weird, Scott Street would have been common. They went for the middle name, Falcon Street. And this is how he's remembered and celebrated in Christchurch, New Zealand, in this tremendous sculpture by his widow, Kathleen. And I love it because it shows Scott courageous and determined and adventurous, not starving, defeated and alone. It's Scott as he lived, not as he died.
The whole empire was stirred by the heroism of Scott's party and claimed for them victory and death. In fact, we tended to deprecate the Norwegian success.
But these days in New Zealand, even a Munster has his own legacy.
Many years ago, the Royal Thai Air Force sent out 50 officers for training. And part of that training was 1 day in the Canterbury Museum. I was standing by the bust of Amundsen at the time, and I, after I'd run out of anything sensible to say, simply said, he who strokes the nose of Amundsen will have many sons and will always come back to this museum. And they all went seriously and stroked his nose, and I thought that would be the end of the matter. Nobody would ever know I ever said it. Next year, 50 Royal Thai Air Force officers arrived, past me like I don't exist, and every man goes and strokes the nose of Amundsen. And so over the years, his nose has become shiny, assisted by a lot of local people, having learnt of this myth.
And have you heard stories back that people said it was very successful for them, that they fathered 5 or 6 sons, or...?
I haven't heard that, but I've seen many women that shunned it when I told them, but seen them sneak back.
Captain Scott lived and partied and had Christmas and his birthday, and to come here and see all the artefacts, it's mind-blowing. But from a curatorial point of view, you've got an amazing amount of stuff in here. And all at risk?
There's definitely a risk. The building is on all three sides at the moment, surrounded with snow and ice. It was built to last for a couple of seasons. It's still here. We've got an ice bank about 2 metres thick directly behind us with a ½ metre of snow on top. Now every year we dig that out and we do basic maintenance on this building. A couple of years ago the ice melted and this building was flooded. That's caused damage to the building. These ice heave under the floorboards and we've already got parts of the structure collapsing, such as the stables. There's high humidity in here. That's causing the paper labels to basically turn to mush. There's still time, but it's getting shorter.
Although this is a nice place to be, Scott's Hut, I've been fascinated by it for a long, long time. I don't feel like I'm welcome here. I don't feel it's a place I should be because it's sort of loaded with meaning and history, and I find all of that a little bit overbearing and a bit uncomfortable. Glad I came, looking forward to leaving.
In 14 flights to Antarctica, Air New Zealand had offered passengers from around the world a chance to see the last great frontier.
Absolutely fabulous, and I've never seen anything like it in my life.
Is it how you expected?
It's beyond anything I've ever dreamt of.
It was a dream experience from the cocktail party comfort of an aircraft dedicated to passenger pleasure.
Oh, it's fantastic.
Is it better than you expected?
I don't know what I expected. It's just beautiful.
The first flight was due over 2 weeks earlier, and I thought I was going to take a good picture of the flight over. It was going to be a dramatic picture that I would then go and sell to Air New Zealand. Well, 2 weeks before the plane came over, the requisite 16,000 feet. It was a dot in the pictures. The following week, I thought, oh, I'm not going to make any kind of spare pocket money by selling a picture to Air New Zealand of a dot in the sky. So I was doing some work around the base, and I didn't even have my camera armed and ready, and the plane came over very low. And so on the 28th of November, I was ready and waiting.
November the 28th, 1979. These are my recollections of the evening, and bearing in mind, I know that memory can play tricks on you. 6:30 news, it went for half an hour, not sure who the newsreader was. At the end of that news, I believe that there was a report that Air New Zealand was concerned about a sightseeing plane to Antarctica that was late in returning. The evening's viewing then, Gemini Man, Barney Miller Armchair Thriller, or Fantastic Journey, Who Pays the Ferryman Taxi. I can't remember what channel I was on.
You could turn the Scott base radio over to the control tower channel, and you could listen to conversation between people in the control tower and pilots. And on the 28th of November, I was listening because I wanted to rush out and get a really good photograph. And then the radio went silent. And nobody thought anything much of it at that stage because radio communications were notoriously unreliable in Antarctica.
There was a late night news at 9:30 or 10 o'clock, and during that news, I think they said that they were really concerned about the Air New Zealand plane because it would have run out of fuel by now. And then at the end of that news, they crossed to Murray Davis, the chair of Air New Zealand, that famous shot with him looking so grim at the end of that long table.
Circumstances indicate that any chance that is a very, very slim one.
I think that's when I and everyone realised that a major catastrophe had happened.
Ironically, Antarctica is a very quiet place. There's not much traffic noise, there's no animal noise, and yet my abiding memory of the evening is noise, just the constant drone of the planes either flying, getting ready to take off, coming in and landing. And it was about midnight that night that they found the wreckage on the slopes of Mount Erebus.
New Zealand, Air New Zealand, Antarctica changed forever. And vividly remember the next morning at school, everyone talking about it and everyone asking each other whether they'd lost family members on the Erebus flight.
At Scott Base, there was one technician from Auckland University whose father-in-law was Peter Mulgrew. And so that Scott Base actually, a
apart from being physically very close to the crash site, and then of course the whole organisation of the recovery effort, the people in Scott Base were also personally affected, as in everybody knew Dave Heyman. You know, they'd been to Tekapo training camp with him, and so that it was in some ways a double tragedy for people at Scott Base. It happened in their backyard, and they were personally affected. I was put on one of the 2 helicopters that went up, and my job was to take photographs. We circled over the crash site and took a whole lot of photographs of, you know, this awful smear in the snow. But when I got back into the Scott-Base darkroom and developed the pictures, I immediately knew which was the picture that would have the greatest impact. It was the picture of the tail of the DC-10 with the Koru sign on the snow, and you know that symbolised the tragedy because the Koru sign was so identifiable not just with Air New Zealand but with New Zealand as a whole.
The thing I didn't realise before I came to Antarctica and Ross Island is a huge presence of Mount Erebus. It's right in the middle of Ross Island. It sits there. You can see it the whole time. It's an active volcano, so the whole time it's kind of smoking away, erupting. And of course, for my whole time down here, I've been continually reminded about that day in 1979, probably the greatest of the recent tragedies. And that's been a whole almost melancholy underfeel to my whole trip down here. It's been an amazing trip, but Erebus has always sort of been reminding me of the mortality of this place.
But enough of being serious, back to the joys of the base.
Communal living, sleeping with people I don't know, by all accounts is psychometrically tested, so if you've got a short fuse or you're XYY or you fly off the handle, you're not here. They seem to be gentle sort of people. Rooming with them, not a problem. Hey, how you liking it, Marcus? Things okay? Do you want a coffee? Can I wash your knife? Well, they haven't said that yet, but they're friendly sort of people. Mainly South Islanders, interestingly enough. Not the Aucklanders, but people, the community. So it's sweet. It's like a youth hostel, but without the humorless Germans or those sort of beer-drunk British Boers or the done-everything Aussies. It's like a youth hostel, but full of Kiwis. That's a beautiful combination. Oh no, I'm in a room with 3 riggers. Oh, lovely guys, like quite respectful. They're big and burly, but at night they're quite delicate when they come in. I mean, not delicate, but it's not like, lushy, lushy. Oh, they're up at about 7. Yeah. No, the light doesn't go on. They just give me a light tap as they go. They go see in the evening. Good filming. Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. And we're all snorers. And it's, no, of course, there's no fights. There's been nothing like that down here.